Okay, cool. So we've started recording. So, welcome to the third edition of Value Investing for Beginners. What we're going to do in this session is we're just going to discuss basically what have historically been good investments and what's the future looking like, and especially what the past decade was, and then we're going to move on to the best track records in value investing, and of course, right at the end, we're again going to discuss great companies. Okay, so getting back to this, so the conventional wisdom of your parents has uh, actually been right. Gold has historically produced pretty phenomenal returns, and like I said, just for that 10 year period between the 70s and the 80s, gold has done close to 20 CAGR. And historically, it has always been the case that whenever there is high inflation, gold does really, really well. Okay. But if you had invested in gold exactly 10 years ago, all right, so that is basically in the year 2011, you took all of your savings and put it into gold, you would have had not just a flat decade, you would have lost 6%. And this is just 6% of the money you put in. You also lost 4% a year in basically inflation. All right. So you lost purchasing power. Okay. So let's look at what the best performing asset classes have been for the last 10 years. Bitcoin. Okay, just doing a quick calculation, and like I've heard stories of people in 2014, 2015, 2016, my friends telling me, oh, me and my dad bought Bitcoin, but then we made this giant mistake of selling it when it doubled. All right, some people were like, oh, it doubled, then it halved, and I sold at a loss. What a big mistake. Basically, if you'd bought and left it alone. Okay, so let's just say you had 10,000 rupees. I'm doing this calculation on my phone calculator right now. Okay, so basically, if you had 10,000 rupees, all right, and actually, yeah, so if you had 10,000 rupees and you left it alone for 10 years, which I highly doubt anyone did. I don't know anyone that did that, because it's a very, very crazy speculative graph. But yeah, if you had left it alone for 10 years, your 10,000 rupees would have effectively become, yeah, okay, crazy number, 9 crores, 99 lakh 50,000. Your 10,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees, okay, 10,000 rupees 10 years later would have become 9 crore 95 lakh 50,000 rupees. So those are crazy, crazy, crazy returns. And obviously, nobody, in the hindsight, things are clearer, but nobody knew beforehand that Bitcoin is going to be this big. All right. And even right now, if you're looking at like the returns of the past 10 years and you decide to invest right now, it's not necessary that you're going to see similar success over the next 10 years. And in fact, if all the world countries come together and actually ban Bitcoin, then actually you lose pretty much everything. And basically, just the emotional roller coaster of basically making crazy returns and having them completely wiped out is like crazy. It'll pretty much drive you mad. So again, since it's pure speculation, you cannot calculate intrinsic value of what Bitcoin is. You can't say, okay, Bitcoin's intrinsic value is $50,000, so anytime it drops below $50,000, I'm buying it. That's not really possible. So okay, again, let's talk about Tesla. All right. So again, taking the same 10,000 rupees amount, okay, and 15,200%, it would have become 15 lakh 30,000 rupees. All right. So you can also like talk about just gaining like an extra 2% a year, just because your holdings were in US dollars. All right, the rupee declines, but you can think of it as gaining an extra 2 to 3%, just by being in US dollars. So that's pretty amazing. Nvidia. So again, all of these have basically been the greatest asset classes. The S&P 500, of course, is the 500 best stocks of the New York Stock Exchange, and S&P 500 is essentially an index, a weighted index that basically puts the maximum percentage in the biggest company, then the next biggest percentage according to their market capitalization. So that's what the S&P 500 is, and basically investors in the US especially try to beat this metric. So historically, S&P 500 has returned like 10% a year. So that's considered like a benchmark that you must defeat if you have to call yourself a super investor, a great investor. All right. So again, I think with Nvidia, if you had deep industry insights, you could have called it. You could have called it. With Netflix, I think it's pretty much like a Peter Lynch stock, basically. Netflix, anyone could have predicted this. Anyone could have been like, okay, Netflix is taking over the world. Let me just go ahead and buy Netflix stock. All right. So 2,337% gains for 10 years. That's amazing. That's amazing. No value investor has made this sort of return. All right. So these are amazing returns. So like if you just taken everything you had and put it in Netflix stock because you knew Netflix was taking over the world and you looked at their financials and they looked healthy, you could have made a lot of money. Amazon, you could have made a lot of money. Microsoft, you couldn't have. There's a reason for that. So Microsoft had basically reached an asymptote in its earnings, basically in the 2000s. All right, it had nowhere to grow because it had its main business was basically Windows and its products, and it was already everywhere. All right, it had nowhere else to grow. But then what happened was in 2014 things completely changed. In 2014, because of Microsoft Azure, they basically copied Amazon AWS, which is like a cloud service. All right, and basically Netflix is hosted on Amazon Web Services. CIA's entire network is hosted on Amazon Web Services. So like cloud is the future. People really don't want the headache of maintaining their own servers or even renting them out. All right. I mean, basically in the cloud, you are renting out server space only, but it's a lot more convenient, and it's a pay per use model. All right. So it's a win-win thing for everyone. Okay. So in 2014, uh, Microsoft saw a crazy new business that was growing really well. All right. And hold on, let me pull up Microsoft stock. Okay, so we'll do share this tab instead. Okay, so I think you guys can see this tab now. So right, so we're just talking about the last 5 years. Okay, 2014, 2016, that's when it started. Okay, so crazy returns. All right, but if you look at the graph, basically between here and here, all right, between 2003 and 2007, 2009 actually, 2010, 11, basically 2012. So from 2003 to 2012, so those are 9 years. All right, almost a decade. So for that decade, if you had invested in Microsoft stock, your stock would have moved nowhere. All right, your stock would have moved nowhere. So again, like there's this great concept that John Malone talks about. John Malone is another great investor, and he's a billionaire. He's called the cable cowboy. Basically, he's the guy that made the first few cable companies and basically reached world domination through it. And he's not just a great businessman, he's also a great investor. He is often overlooked as a great investor. So again, he talks about this concept of an asymptote. An asymptote is like we studied math, right? So the asymptote is that horizontal line where you're like, okay, the company has reached how much it's ever going to ever earn in earnings, and it's going nowhere above that. All right. So that decade that Microsoft stock was pretty much flat was because it had reached an asymptote. It had nowhere else to grow. All right, like where Coke is right now, it has nowhere else to grow. It's already available in every fucking country. All it can do right now is use its cash pile to acquire new companies and buy back its own shares. So that's one way that they can keep growing. But in 2014, their Azure really took off, and it's obviously like now after first the first biggest cloud provider is basically Amazon Web Services, AWS. After that, it's Microsoft Azure, and after that, it's the others, Google Cloud, and they have like very small market shares. But yeah, so Azure really saved Microsoft as a company. I mean, in terms of growth, saved Microsoft stock basically. All right. So now it destroyed that asymptote because it had a new business that was going to be just as big as its primary business. And so yeah, it really worked out for them. But if there hadn't been Azure, Microsoft stock wouldn't be here where it is right now. It would be at 27 $29, just like it was for more than a decade, right? Okay. So let's go back to our list, sharing this tab again. Okay, so Netflix, you could have totally called it. All right, you saw Netflix taking over the world, you could have called it. Amazon, the thing with Amazon is that its core business has a profit margin of 0.1%, so it earns practically nothing. And it's the same thing happened with Amazon. All right, Amazon uh, Amazon stock was saved by AWS. Again, AWS is a business that's still growing like a beast and is like a tremendous cash cow for Amazon. Okay, like if they ever spun off AWS into another stock, I would be buying AWS. Granted, the price is right, obviously, lol. So again, like it Amazon right now is basically like one of those conglomerates, right? Where basically they have a few businesses, and those businesses are loss making businesses, but then there is one really good business which is like, subsidizing the other businesses. So that's like, whatever. Okay, so like, you could have called Amazon, you could have called Netflix, Microsoft, not really. Okay, Apple, yeah, you could have totally called it. Apple, you could have totally called it. You know that they have a moat. People are willing to pay extra for their products. And the great thing with Apple is, and I'd also like to get your insights again, Apple is a great company. The great thing about them is they can innovate because they're the biggest company in the world. And aside from the ability to innovate, they can also look at everyone else. If something is working out in the world, they can essentially just copy that business and price it much higher. All right, which is like a power that no one else in the world has. All right, they see Spotify working, they make Apple Music. All right, they see wireless earbuds working, they basically come out with AirPods. All right, and then of course, then seeing Apple's success, everyone else also wants to make something similar to AirPods. All right, they see they also routinely come up with their own innovations. Like for example, iPad. There were tablets before that, but no tablet computer was that good. So they came up with it, they did it really well. AirTags, again, basically they can keep coming up with, they see the fucking wireless mouse working, and they come up with magic mouse and price it like crazy, like it's something like a crazy innovation. So they can essentially look at the whole world, they can keep innovating. And then aside, again, yeah, again, amazing, they see the digital watch working, they come out with the Apple Watch. All right, no company in the world has this power to come to the scene later and be able to charge a higher price, and people will still line up to buy their products. And again, people do actually line up to buy their products every time there is an Apple drop. You see in the news there's long lines outside of Apple stores, right? Although that hype is slowly dying down, but people will still pay the extra amount for Apple. And again, no charger. People don't give a fuck. People are like, yeah, give me the new iPhone. Apple Pencil, yeah, amazing. They see the stylus working and they come out with Apple Pencil. And the great thing is, because they're the biggest company in the world, because they have the brightest minds in the world working with them, they can even bring in their own modifications and often come out with a far superior product. All right. And again, they recently came out with the M1 chip, which was of course their whole in-house thing, along with ARM Holdings, of course. But yeah, so it can innovate, and then it can look at other people and just copy their innovations as well, and charge a high amount for that. So Apple, you must have seen it coming. Okay. So far, Bitcoin can't see it coming, Tesla can't see it coming, Nvidia can't see it coming, Netflix, you can see it coming, Amazon, you can see it coming, Apple, you can see it coming, Google. Google is basically the newspaper of the world. All right. So in Warren Buffett's time, newspapers were really profitable. All right, because having a newspaper means that you have basically real estate on paper to print ads. All right. You have the you have the right to print ads. And earlier, what used to happen was, hold on, guys, can you excuse me for a minute? Guys, just give me a minute, I'll be back. Yes, I'm back. So, okay. So, Apple, you could have definitely seen it coming. And then again, uh, with Google, they're basically they take care of the world's advertising, Google and Facebook. All right. So anybody that wants to advertise basically has to go to either Google or Facebook. All right. So they're basically toll tax businesses. All right. You have to pay them a toll tax to basically expand your own business. You want to be in business, you got to pay Google and Facebook to advertise. All right. So they're amazing businesses. Anytime you find a toll tax business, anytime you find a toll tax business, it's really something to look at. Just like CDSL in India. All right. So it basically takes care of basically holding everyone's stock in India, and it pretty much has a monopoly. There is another company called NSDL, but CDSL is basically the standard for all retail investors. So again, anytime you find a toll tax business, go for it. Okay, S&P 500. Yeah, you could have just basically. I remember one product. Wait, Akshay Kumar tried it as well. What? Wait, yeah, basically to give more comfy or support to body, even medical. What? What do you mean, Utkarsh? Is there a bio machine or What? Utkarsh, are you trying to say something? Okay, never mind. Let's. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
like next and any like company which is right now in initial stage of investing, working on like biomimic technology or something like that, because that would be very far, like revolutionize everything what we see now.
Wait, you're
If
talking about what?
like meanwhile you were away, so I was just typing for the next 10 years. Click on आएंगे, maybe next 50 years.
Okay, so the
Which
thing,
companies which are not here but can come.
basically the thing is that basically in the biomedical industry, and again in like pharma, basically it's very capital intensive. You have to spend billions of dollars to get 1000 potential products. From that, you have only 10 products that remain, and from that only one passes FDA testing. So basically it's a very unpredictable business. All right. Of course, once you've got a great drug, you can patent it, you can do great things. But hold on, guys, just excuse me for a second. I'll be right back.
Like, uh, what is this company, Kunal? Like Gravity? Guys, do anybody have idea about biomimic? Like that's a good stuff, but far from potential.
Yes, sir. I'm back. So, yeah. Okay. So what were you saying? Neuralink. So basically, the thing is, yeah, some of these companies are gonna turn out to be great companies in the future. But the thing is, just painting it with a broad stroke and saying this industry is going to be big and buying like an industry ETF is not a good idea. And so basically, especially in the pharma industry, you're going to get killed with that strategy. So don't bet on a company that could potentially make a good thing. Basically, what value investors do is let that company already win the game. All right, let them have the winning formula, and then you put your money in. And even after then, you can make 10 times, 20 times, 50 times your money. All right. So like if you guys listen to Peter Lynch talk, he says basically hold on, if you're rolling the dice on a company potentially making a world changing product, what you're basically doing is venture investing. All right. That's very risky. And basically 99.99% of your investments are going to be failures. All right. What we as value investors want is a risk averse procedure where we know for sure what company is going to do well, and then we put our money in that company and make tons of money. All right. You can be a venture investor. It's a very noble job. They help change the world and all. That's great. But don't do it if you want to protect your capital. And even people who do venture investing basically raise billions of dollars from like the king of Saudi Arabia, from like basically sovereign wealth funds and all. So again, like venture investing is very risky. But then again, when you've made 1000 investments in startups, if one of them really works out, that really takes care of everything else. All right. Like you invested in 999 shitty startups, and then you also put like $500,000 in Uber, and then it becomes this giant company. It's basically made you like 6,000 times your money, and you're basically good to go. So again, venture investing, I don't recommend unless you have a lot of financial backing and you know what you're doing. I'm just talking about value investing. All right. Okay. I just read someone using Bluetooth slippers in Rajasthan for Okay. So Kunal says, talking about world-changing products, I just read someone using Bluetooth slippers in Rajasthan for cheating in exams. Lol. Yeah, man. This is going to be big. They're gonna take the stock to the moon. Lol. Okay, so S&P 500, yeah. So S&P 500 is basically the stock market index. It has historically returned just 10% a year. So if you are a know nothing investor, which means you do not know how to value companies, you can just buy, and 99% of people should do this. Just buy S&P 500 and hold forever. Buy and hold forever. Buy, keep adding to it, keep adding to it every year. Don't jump out of it. All right. And you'll be a very rich person in 20, 30 years. All right. You can't help but be rich if you're putting a lot of money into S&P 500 every month. If you're putting, like, almost a year's salary into S&P 500 and just letting it compound over 20, 30 years. Okay. Bonds are like, yeah, whatever. I mean, bonds don't excite me. Equities, the equity market is a lot better than the bond market. But then there are great investors who make a lot of money in the bond market as well, like Howard Marks. And Howard Marks is one of those investors that Warren Buffett really respects. Like, Warren Buffett doesn't talk about respecting other investors that much. And of course, Howard Marks is amazing. He runs, I think, close to like $150 billion, and he basically makes money in the high yield bond market. So these are companies that are really depressed in a lot of debt, and they're offering really high coupon bonds. So that's how he makes money. So yeah, bonds for me not that exciting. Okay, gold. Yeah, so gold, like I told you, -6% for the decade. So and of course the next 10. The author of this tweet is like, the next 10, what are the next 10 years going to look like? Are we even going to see such crazy returns on anything? Because these especially Bitcoin's return, it's really an anomaly. Is this ever going to happen in history again? Is any asset class going to return 1 million% over 10 years? Who knows? Okay, so these were the best asset classes, and now we're going to switch our discussion to the greatest track records in investing. All right, hold on. Let me get to it. Actually, before we start with that, I'd just like you guys to talk about what have been your favorite companies in the last 10 years whose products you've used and you're really delighted to use the last 10 years. What companies? The reason I'm saying this is because Peter Lynch basically talks about how he was ahead of Wall Street always, because his wife used to introduce him to these great brands, all right, that Wall Street analysts weren't yet tracking, all right. So when Dunkin' Donuts was a young up and coming company, his wife took him to Dunkin' Donuts and said, the coffee here is amazing. We must go to Dunkin' Donuts. And he looked at their financials, and he realized this is a crazy company that's growing. All right. And he made what, 20 times his money in fucking Dunkin' Donuts. And yeah, so his wife would tell him that I bought these leggings at the mall today. It's from this company called L Brands. And he'd look into L Brands and realize, yeah, this company is amazing. And guys, please unmute yourself and talk about the company, please. Okay. I'm going to rest my throat for 5 minutes. I want you guys to talk. Celine, you go first.
Like if you are if you are ask me, then I would definitely talk about the Tata and groups and their whole market. talking about even lives the product they have been releasing for the domestic market of India, and too much class and worth spending. Like if you talk about FMCG product, they are releasing worth quality and giving a good competition to other FMCGs, and have technically given the growth. And if you talk about fashion of the fashion related, like Tata West Side, good clothes, very affordable and very class thing. Yeah, definitely. So overall, Tata has been giving good products, and I like investing in Tata too. Like whichever share I am holding, I invest in Tata like most of the time.
Okay. Anyone? Okay. You know, Geo, yeah, Geo is definitely up there. Changed the game for everyone else. Basically changed basically it changed India's entire like internet ecosystem. Every startup that's going public now is basically thanking Geo for basically the paradigm shift they brought into India, the bandwidth and everything that they gave to the Indian consumers. Even Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, he was talking about the Geo effect and how if Geo had not existed, their business would not be viable in India. So Geo is definitely up there. And so which Tata products do you use, Utkarsh?
Startup product. Let me think. Let me come back. Like for that. Yeah,
So
basically, I have number one product which I regularly using is latest. What I use is Zomato, Ola, Uber. You can say, yeah, and Oyo, yeah, too. That's true. There,
yeah,
all these three
note yourself.
startups.
Yeah, um, these are great companies. Yes, they can be looked at in the future. Currently unprofitable, but yeah, okay. Umang says Bennett Fashion Group, Intel, Bose. Okay. Bose is a private company. Intel is public, but Intel is basically in like a war, pricing war, and intellectual property war has been with AMD for the longest time. And they basically trade market shares between each other like every 6 months. The next year it could be AMD, the year after that it could be Intel. Right now AMD is a little ahead, but yeah, uh, no necessary moat there. Yeah, AMD also has less heating issues, so AMD's product right now is superior to Intel's processors. Yeah, Tata Indicom, what? Yeah, failed badly. Yes, failed badly. Again, because of Geo, the whole dongle business went out of like style.
And talk about Reliance Communication. Totally gone.
Yeah. So RIL bought all of their towers, right? I don't know, yeah, 4 GB for 2 months at 499.
There used to be a company which was going good, like Aircel, if you guys have heard about. Don't know where it is now, but yeah, it was going good. But yeah, Geo again destroyed it.
Hmm. Diageo, how well it's maintained its legacy in the whiskey industry. I think just yesterday there was news of some merger, right, between Diageo and I think United or something in their India businesses. I don't know. Hmm. Might have to look that up. Okay. Okay, let's see. Hmm. Patanjali IPO, please. Yeah, actually, Patanjali
Take
has been
Paytm.
Paytm. Yes.
Paytm is a good startup. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Would you consider buying from their Paytm mall? Like, do you do purchases on their Paytm mall and all?
Don't know why, but I don't get trust to purchase things from there. I don't know why. Like I'll be happy to purchase it from Amazon, then Flipkart. I don't know why. Again, low trust. And Paytm, I never open it at all. Yeah, India Mart is a good stuff if you are looking for bulk order. They give you good prices and good contacts for. I have purchased a lot of things.
Yeah, you're definitely right about Paytm mall and all. I think it's all hype. The only thing people use Paytm for is to pay their Kirana store person and to recharge their mobile phones. Does anyone here use Paytm for anything else, like buying plane tickets or anything like that?
I use Bankit too, like lol for savings and all. Yeah, like anybody have heard about CRED? What do you think about CRED? What about CRED?
I mean,
Latestly,
I don't see how they're going to monetize it, so I'm staying away from it. Or and anyway, it's not a publicly traded company, so there's no there's no question of staying away or staying close to it. Okay. For United Breweries yesterday, penalty of 750 crores. Yes. If you could try to look into Mattel and Hasbro. Yes. Yes. Yeah. They have a deep presence in that space. But I think these companies again really get killed by Chinese competition. And anyway, no one's buying toys anymore. So, you know, the toy market before the iPad was launched was actually like a real phenomenon. And I think in the last session I told you guys how Toys R Us was completely destroyed because people stopped buying toys for their kids and they just gave their kids an iPad to play any games with. So yeah, that model is completely destroyed. Okay, um, I just took that break to eat something I hadn't eaten since morning. So yes, we can get back to our discussion now. Okay, so now we're going to discuss the greatest track records in investing. Okay, so okay, let me present my screen. Okay, so I think you guys can see the tab. So let's talk about the greatest track records in investing. Okay, the greatest obviously is Warren Buffett, close to 21% CAGR. All right, over 43 years. No one has done it for as long as he has. No one has compounded their money for 43 years. All right. Um, Joel Greenblatt. The main metric you want to look at is basically the annual return, which is like the third column, and also you have to put that in perspective with how long they've been doing it. So the longer you do it, the harder it gets. All right. So Warren Buffett right now has $627 billion. There are very few companies in the world that can even absorb his cash. 40% of his portfolio is just Apple now. Okay, so very few companies can actually absorb his cash. So his investable universe is down to less than 20-30 companies. All right, no one's ever had this much money to manage in history before. So he's definitely up there. Legend, obviously. Peter Lynch. I don't know why it says 26.5% here, but I know it's actually 29.2%. Okay. So he returned 29.2% between 1977 and 1990. That's basically when he ran the Fidelity Magellan Fund, which was the greatest mutual fund in history. The greatest mutual fund in history. And a fun story about that mutual fund, the mutual fund returned 29.2% CAGR between 19 basically the 13 years of its existence, right? But the average investor in that fund lost 11%. You know why? They basically sold at the bottom and bought at the highs. So, just like a mutual fund, just like stocks, a mutual fund also fluctuates because, again, it owns stocks. So people basically get scared when its value drops. They freak out and sell. And basically, when it's high, people get really optimistic and buy. So buying high and selling low is very human and also very stupid. What you want to be doing is buying low and selling high, obviously. But of course, if you have someone like Peter Lynch, you just want to buy and hold for as long as you want. So one of the greatest investors, he at any given point of time used to own like 1,500 stocks, all right, compared to Warren Buffett, who until recently used to own and still actually does at max 10 stocks, all right, just 10 stocks. And actually there's this video of Warren Buffett talking about Peter Lynch, and he says Peter owns more stocks than I can remember names of. So Peter Lynch was just like there. And Warren Buffett also said in his annual shareholder meeting, someone asked what's the overlap between your investing strategies. So he said that uh, there is no true religion in investing, but there are definitely lots of useful religions that help you get to heaven, and Peter's is one of them. And yeah, and Peter Lynch basically again managed the biggest, he had grown it to the biggest mutual fund in American history again. But then he retired in 1990 because his whole reasoning was his father had died at at the age of 40 or something, and he was basically roughly that age at that point, and he did not want to he knew his father had died then, so he sort of felt like there are decent chances I also might die around this time and age, and I basically want to spend the rest of my life with my family and all. So he basically walked away with $300 million, retired. One of the greatest investors retired. Really sad. Shouldn't have retired. Hate to say that, but yeah, he did. So his Peter. Let's talk about Peter Lynch's strategy. Peter Lynch basically did this strategy called the scuttlebutt, which comes from Phil Fisher. It basically means just keep on talking, just keep on asking, and just keep on verifying. All right. So this guy used to take on meetings on meetings on meetings on meetings, and then he would meet investors, and he would meet heads of companies and ask them who is your most fierce competitor, who is going to kill you, all right. And then he would take meetings with those people and ask them if that's really true, look at their financials and invest in those companies. So Peter Lynch basically says uh, not just him, his proteges, there are two proteges that he has. Let me see if I can find them here. Basically him and his proteges, what they do is they basically keep on taking meetings on meetings on meetings, and finding where the next company is that's going to have a breakout year and kill its competition. And so he actually ends up owning thousands of companies at any given point of time. And also he says, remind me to talk about holding period every single time. Yes, Jim Simons is amazing. We'll discuss Jim Simons. Yes, yes. Okay, remind me. Okay, basically, Peter Lynch used to say, any of my positions, they take 3 to 7 years to play out. So anything he buys, he holds for at least 3 to 7 years. Comparing that with Warren Buffett has a buy and hold forever strategy. So early on in his life, Warren Buffett used to invest in companies what are called cigar butts. All right, these are companies who are trading at below net working capital, and trading below their liquidation value. So these are like the micro cap stocks that you these are companies you've never even heard of. They are shitty companies, but they're trading so at such a fraction of their original value that you can buy them and really not lose any money. So this is the strategy that was invented by Ben Graham, who's called the uh, godfather, who's the father of value investing. So Warren Buffett was his student in Columbia Business School. That's where he learned it from. So again, this is the strategy that Warren Buffett followed early on in his life, and then he realized he couldn't scale that strategy. So in comes along Charlie Munger, and he teaches him to buy quality companies. So there's this popular Warren Buffett quote called, "It's better to buy a good company at a fair price than buying a fair company at a good price." So then from focusing on shitty companies that are trading at a real fraction of their true values, he started focusing on really good companies and actually paying a little extra for them. All right. So their first such investment was See's Candy, and then after that, of course, Coca-Cola. He bought Coca-Cola at a PE of 30. So he was that guy who never used to buy companies at a PE of 30. He was looking for companies that were trading below their liquidation value, below their net working capital. All right. And then he taught himself how to, instead of looking for the cheapest bargain, cheapest shitty stock, he would actually pay a little extra for a great stock and gain tremendous amounts of money that way. Okay. So again, Peter Lynch looks for the next big company that's going to destroy its competition. Warren Buffett looks for great companies that have been around for really long and are going to continue to be around for really long. Okay. Let's talk about Joel Greenblatt, another great guy. He wrote the book, How You Can Be a Stock Market Genius. The title is really horrible, but the book is amazing. It's basically like a hedge fund manager favorite book. So hedge fund managers really read his works. He's also written this book called The Little Book That Beats the Market. Very insightful things he's written over the years, and of course his returns speak for him. 30% annualized returns between 1985 and 1994, and now he runs like a close-ended private fund just for himself to manage his own money. Okay. Rob Vinal, he hasn't been around for that long, but then 20%. He's the manager at RV Capital. There's Tweedy Brown. Tweedy Brown is really amazing. Tweedy Brown is basically this fund is basically one of those original people who attended that class at Columbia Business School with Warren Buffett. Him, Bill Ruane, um, uh, Rick Goyrin. Uh, Basically, these are the original value investors that basically learned from Graham and basically practice their art to amass huge amounts of money. And so this fund has, of course, been around since 1968. They've basically given an annual return of 20%, which is amazing. For that long, giving an annual return of 20%, just amazing. Hats off. Then we have Prem Vatsa. So Prem Vatsa is basically a Canadian guy of Indian origin. He is called the Warren Buffett of Canada. So he basically runs this company called Fairfax Holdings, and that company is basically called the Berkshire Hathaway of Canada. So really great investor. Terry Smith, one of my favorites. This guy is amazing. This guy is amazing. Terry Smith basically says this. Terry Smith says, if you buy great companies at great prices, you do not need value investing. All right. Okay. So he says that if you buy a company that has great return on invested capital, has been around for really long, has already won its game, Just buy that company and hold it for many years, and you can't help but make great returns. All right. So amazing guy. So yeah. So he says, Terry Smith says something really good. He says that the question that people ask is this stock cheap? And then ask, is this company good? And he says it should actually be in the reverse order. You should actually ask, first, is this a really good company? All right. And then you should ask, is this stock price relatively fair? And it does not even have to be cheap. And you buy it and you make great returns. So, uh, should I invest in Adani, bro? bro, bro, chill. एक बार पहले ये हो जाने दे, okay? Okay, so then we have Lilu. He is called the Warren Buffett of China, even though I mean, I think he's an American citizen only. But yeah, he came from China. Uh, really great investor. All right, JM Aveyard. He's this French guy who got influenced by Graham, and yeah, great returns. Tom Russo. Tom Russo is basically he basically manages Markel Corporation. If you guys have heard of it, Markel is another great stocks. Okay, so Markel basically tried to replicate Berkshire Hathaway's success. So Berkshire Hathaway essentially owns insurance companies that pay them a lot of float every single year, and then they use that float to buy great companies. All right. So Markel, again, the owners, they had this great insurance company that was paying them close to like 10 million, 20 million a year. They brought in this guy Tom Russo, and he said, why don't you do for us what Warren Buffett did for his insurance companies? And this guy was like, okay. And yeah, one of the greatest capital allocators. And he also, again, believes in buying quality companies rather than buying a company at a cheap price. Sir John Templeton, just a legend. This guy is a fucking legend. This guy, when World War II happened, he borrowed $10,000 from his boss. This is World War II. Okay, so $10,000 is a really huge amount of money. So he borrowed $10,000, and then he bought every single company. He bought close to 100 companies that were trading at exactly $1. All right, and at a time when everybody was exiting the stock market because the war had started, he was going in. All right, so there's this really nice quote by John Templeton that really talks about being a contrarian when you're investing. He says, buy when there is blood on the streets, even if the blood is yours. Okay, you gotta be basically, again, this has been said by many people in many different ways. Warren Buffett says, be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. So basically you have to be the opposite of what other people are, basically, just to be a contrarian investor. All right, so this guy basically bought when the World War started, and by the time the World War II had ended in 1945, he had made 5 times his money. He had made 5 times his money. He returned everything, returned all of the loans he had taken from his boss, and then he started his fund. And John Templeton basically traveled the whole world. All right, he traveled the whole world. He came back, and then he realized that American investors are too stuck up in American stocks. There are great opportunities worldwide. So he realized his entire life strategy is basically buying when there's blood on the streets. So he looks for where there is a recession going on. He goes to that stock market and picks up great companies over there that are selling at dirt cheap prices. And again, he has been around for a very long time. So John Templeton started in 1955 and continued all the way to 1992. Okay, so that's basically 43 years of compounding. Hold on, 37 years. 37 years. So he's done it for 37 years, and yeah, 37 years and making a 15% return. That's really amazing. That's really amazing. Okay, Bill Ackman, another great guy. So Bill Ackman, basically this guy, he Wow, he is true trader. He is not a trader, bro. He's an investor. Exited with Kunal says exited with Harshad Mehta. Coincidence? Yeah, Harshad Mehta was a fraud. Please do not idolize that man. Okay, okay. Which stock increased highest in the history of stock market? Take any of the bubble stocks. They are the ones that grow the highest and then subsequently burst. Okay, hold on. Actually, guys, once I'm done discussing all of these great names, I'll get to your questions. Okay, one by one. Okay, so you guys will really like the story. Bill Ackman. Okay, this guy was studying history in Harvard Business School. Dad was very rich. This guy came from a rich family, did not know what he wanted to do in life, and then he stumbled upon The Intelligent Investor by Ben Graham. He read it, and then he realized that just by reading the works of Warren Buffett, I can become a great investor. And he told his dad, I'm starting my hedge fund right out of school, right out of business school, sorry. Not school. That would be amazing. So right out of business school, he started his hedge fund. Okay, he started his hedge fund now. uh, and his thesis was, his hypothesis was, I can become a great investor just by reading every single thing that Warren Buffett has ever read. And he was right, he did it. He never learned investing, he never learned finance in college anywhere. And actually none of these guys on this list have actually ever been to a business school, studied finance. Warren Buffett has, Joel Greenblatt has, but they studied things very unrelated to finance. And they often actually learned the wrong things at business school, and they taught themselves the right things by reading the works of Benjamin Graham and Warren Buffett. Okay, and crazy returns. And Bill Ackman's returns would have been even more amazing if he hadn't if he hadn't lost a lot of money on Valiant and Valiant Pharmaceuticals and obviously Herbalife. So uh, a great investor. Two bad investing decisions fucked up his track record. Otherwise, he would have been up there, like at a very high percentage. But yeah, still great investor. We can learn a lot from him. Chuck Aker. This guy basically, again, buys great companies and holds them for years. Great companies hold them for years. Okay. Sequoia. This is not Sequoia that does venture investing. This is Sequoia Fund that is run by Bill Ruane. He is also one of the students of Benjamin Graham. Again, great long-term returns. Seth Klarman. This guy, again, amazing. Monish Pabrai, I love this guy. This guy has taught me so much about investing. In fact, I don't think I've learned more from anyone else. I've learned the most from him. And his CAGR is at 12% because he made a giant mistake. Okay, so this guy basically, Monish Pabrai, he's so fucking talented. In just first 5 years of being in investing, he basically 13x'd his money. Started with 1 million, it became 13 million in just 5 years. Okay, those are amazing returns. And he did it at the time of the dot-com bubble when everyone else was losing money. The entire world was losing money. He 13x'd his money. This guy is so fucking brilliant. But basically, in the two in basically the 2000s and the 2010s, he bought this shitty ass company called Horsehead Holdings, and he thought that he knew what he was doing. That company went towards bankruptcy and the stock went to zero. And he basically lost 40% of his fund's capital because of that one thing. So great investor, of course, his track record, basically let's talk about a great batsman. Okay, a batsman who has a great hitting average. All right, but then for 2 or 3 years in between, he's basically not able to make even one shot. His track record is marred. But then after those 3 years, he does come back. So again, in sports, the thing is that with age you actually get worse, but in investing with time you actually get better. So the thing is that, again, He's really one of the smartest guys in investing. His investment record is marred because of that Horsehead Holdings mistake. But yeah, great guy. Then of course these guys are like whatever, Bruce Berkowitz and Guy Spear. They're like pretty average. Okay. Mm. So yeah, these are like returns about and yeah, actually we can let me show you another list as well that I have over here. All right, so these guys are all great investors, and if you guys have names of other great investors, you guys can tell me. So so we've discussed what were the best asset classes of the last 10 years, and who are the best investors and what their strategies are. So I'll just take questions now. So okay, which stock has increased the highest in the history of the US stock market? The thing is that uh, capitalism is brutal. All right. So basically, 99% of all companies that start basically go out of business in the first 5 years. And the companies that you see today are going to go out of business in the next 20, 30 years. Okay, like Warren Buffett showed us this list in his previous I think I've mentioned this in our previous meet also, in his annual shareholders meeting, like how in the 1980s the top companies were all Japanese, but in just 10, 20 more years they would again become all American. So the thing is that what you see as the biggest companies today might not be the biggest companies in 10, 20 years, even if you feel so to be the case. I think Apple is going to hold that position for a long period of time. Google's going nowhere, Facebook is going nowhere. But other companies that you see are very ripe for disruption. And yeah, earlier the average time a company spent on the Fortune 500 was 60 years. Now it's down to 8 years. Okay. So, again, with disruption, lots of the companies that you see around you are going to go out of business. In fact, Charlie Munger also said this, that most companies we invested in at Berkshire Hathaway have actually now gone out of business. So, what you basically want to do is identify great companies, take returns from them, look at when they've reached their asymptote and get out. Okay. And then redeploy your capital where the new growth is. My dad told me that Philip Morris, yes, Philip Morris is a great stock. Philip Morris is an amazing company. And the primary reason for that is that it sells an addictive product that people have to keep buying. All right. Um, Philip Morris is amazing. Okay. Any books reference from Benjamin Graham? Yeah, you can read The Intelligent Investor, you can read Security Analysis, and you can read Interpretation of Financial Statements. These are three books by him that are considered like the Bibles of value investing. So you can definitely check them out. Okay. Okay, so let's just dive into the discussion of great companies. Unless someone has any questions. So, okay, guys, what do you have for me this week? Jim Simons, yes, Jim Simons is the greatest fund manager in history. He is the greatest fund manager in history. Let me pull up his record. He has returned 70% annually for way too fucking long. Hold on. Let me see. Okay. Okay. I can't find some graph for it, but yeah, we can definitely discuss Jim Simons. So Jim Simons runs what's called a quant fund. All right. So he has the best, smartest people in the world working for him, working with him, in fact, because they're also partners in the fund. So He basically has a Nobel laureate. Uh, yes, found it. Let me share the tab. Hold on. Hold on. Let me share the tab. And basically with his returns, you've basically learned how to make gold in this world, and you just cannot be poor if you're making these returns. Nobody has done what he has done. You guys can see the screen, right? He has made a CAGR of 70%. The blue is the S&P 500, mind you, and the black is his returns every single year. Just one down year over here, and this was just the second year of them trying out their artificial intelligence. So they've been using artificial intelligence before artificial intelligence was a buzzword. They've been doing it since the 1990s, and this is his flagship fund called the Medallion Fund. All right. So he basically has returned, okay, this is net of fees. Net of fees, he's returned 40% CAGR. The actual returns are 70%. So is this guy is was basically a mathematician. He was a code breaker for the NSA. All right. Then he quit his job. He was briefly a mathematics professor, and then he started getting interested in commodities trading. And Utkarsh, this guy is actually a trader. Okay. So he got interested in commodities trading. He partnered up with a few people, made a little money, and then he realized that he's emotional and he needs to convert this into computer algorithms. So he invited the best astrophysicists, the best mathematicians, Nobel laureate physicists to his company, which was Renaissance Technologies, and asked them. He said, these movements in the stock market, they can't really be random. There has to be some pattern. There has to be some pattern, and let's find that pattern. And together they did. And so basically, he's basically developed artificial intelligence systems. All right. Whereby basically their computers take in tons and tons and tons of data. And in fact, Robert Mercer, who is the current CEO of actually he just stepped down last year, current CEO of the previous CEO of Rentec, he said there is no such thing, there is no such data as more data. So they keep on feeding their computers years on years on years on years on years on years of data, and then the AI tells them what to do. And they've been doing it since the 1990, or since the 1990s basically. And basically in their fund, no human being ever makes a trade. It's always the computer that tells them what trade to make, and even if that trade doesn't make sense, they have to make that trade. Okay. And by the way, it's a highly leveraged fund, meaning they borrow a lot of money every single year. All right. But they basically, this is how Bob Mercer says it: Rentex trades are right 50.75% of the time, which means the other roughly half percent of the time they are wrong. Okay. But the 0.75% that of the correct trades that they make basically take care of every single thing, and they make these crazy 70% returns, net of fees 40%, which is amazing. And by the way, you cannot invest in this fund. It's closed to outsiders. It's only Jim Simons, his employees, and his friends. They're very secretive about what they basically do inside their company. And yeah, basically, if these secrets came out, they would stop working. That's basically how trading is. And they're also very smart about how they execute their trades. So basically, like if they find that on basically New Year's every single year between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., the price of gold rises 5%, they will buy it slowly across many different timestamps so that they don't give away their strategy. So the way they even conduct their trades is such that nobody has been able to decipher, not even authorities have been able to decipher how they make their trades. And again, they borrow a lot of money and they're right only 50.75% of the times. The rest of the times they're wrong. Okay, so they are basically a quantitative fund. They use a lot of mathematics, AI, and basically Bob Mercer, who was previously the CEO, he was basically the guy that invented NLP programming. All right, like basically everything that you use these days in voice recognition, like when you open up your Google's mic and you say something and it turns that into text. He basically started that at IBM. So he was a brilliant computer scientist. And these guys, yeah, these guys are the guys behind the greatest hedge fund of all time. And Jim Simons obviously is the richest mathematician that has ever lived. 23 fucking billion dollars, very fucking rich. And he's not been doing it for too long. He's only been doing it since the 1990s, a little bit before that. Take Warren Buffett, for example. He's been doing it since he was 21 years of age. So he's already at one third of Warren Buffett's Warren net worth. And if, of course, if he keeps doing it for like 10, 20 more years, although he's retired now, he's going to be the richest man in the world. But I think Jim Simons is already pretty aged. Jim Simons, let's see. Jim Simons is 83 years old. So yeah, let's see if he even keeps going or not. Anyway, like once you reach those kind of net worths, you don't really care about money anymore. It's not about accumulating cash anymore. So yeah, greatest hedge fund in history. Thanks for bringing that up. Navinder Sarao. Who is that? I have no idea. Who is Navinder Sarao? Let me Google it. Navinder Sarao. That Flash crash trader Navinder Sarao went from sentenced to 1 year of home detention. Who is this? Okay, I'll have to look him up. I have no idea who this is. Okay, yeah. This is the Indian guy in fucking UK who was imprisoned for something, right? For doing something wrong. But yeah, generally, like macroeconomic forecasts, avoid them because they're very hard to make. And of course you make money only once in a blue moon with them. So yeah, I have no idea about Navinder Sarao. Maybe you want to tell us something, Sajib.
So basically, he did like order spoofing, which hedge funds they look for and use for market manipulation. So he figured out a trend and he created a bot to, play against the trend. So he made like I think 50 million in a summer. So then they, took him to court for doing that basically.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, so I think companies like Citadel and all, they are basically the market makers, and all of your discount brokers, right? The ones that give you brokerage for free, basically. It's never been free. The only reason it's free is that they give these orders, your orders, to these hedge funds. Like Robinhood gives its orders to order flows to Citadel, and these companies basically make money on the data of your orders. So yeah, it's like I they penalized one man for going against the order flows and finding trends. But yeah, I
Yeah,
that's what these
I
big.
might be wrong, but like what he did was he would place orders really quickly and delete them, and basically hedge funds would look at orders that are placed and lower the price. So uh, his bot did that like in milliseconds, and that caused the stock market to crash for a couple of minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and through that he made a lot of money.
Okay, so he actually caused a flash crash.
Yeah, he caused a flash crash.
Okay. Then it makes sense why they why they put him
Yep.
in home detention. Yeah. I mean, yeah, whatever. I mean, yeah. what can I say? I mean, these big companies predict, like the Goldmans and the Lehmans and the Deutsches of the world, basically do it and legally get away with it with no consequences, and they're picking on the little guy. So, like, fuck that. But yeah, nice. I'll definitely look him up.
There's even Vega Capital. Um,
Sounds familiar.
Last summer there was that time when oil prices went
Oh
negative.
yes. I've heard of these guys. I've heard of these guys. So
Yeah.
I think Sanjeev and I keep up with Bloomberg a lot, right?
No, actually, I find all of these on YouTube.
Oh, on YouTube.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Bloomberg could take.
Yeah. So these guys basically, they basically made 900 million, right? 900 million, uh, when when basically oil futures hit negative $40 per barrel. So this was like a crazy opportunity for them. They made $900 million. They're very secretive, and they're being audited by regulators. But then, of course, they've done nothing illegal, so they can't really arrest them. So anytime someone makes a great amount of money on a short bet, basically regulators come after you, just like they did after Michael Burry, Bill Ackman, all of these guys who bet against the housing market in 2008. So yeah, nice, very interesting story. Yeah, I mean, it's just like a heist. Like, imagine making $900 million in one day, you and your friends. Amazing. Yeah, cool. Okay, so any more questions, guys? Okay, so we'll just discuss more great companies. Yeah. Okay, so what do you have for me this week, guys? Any great companies? Kunal, do you have any ideas? Jhunjhunwala made 21 crores on the Z stock, right? The Z stocks jumped what, 60%, 30%, right? Yeah. Yeah, that the Jhunjhunwala has was actually facing an insider trading case for Aptech, basically, and he settled by just paying uh, like a fee, basically, which says that I'm neither admitting nor denying that I've done this. So yeah, so Jhunjhunwala has actually had some he's done some shady shit, which means like company insiders have from time to time given him information. So I don't know. And also, I don't understand his trading style. He holds stocks for like a few months and then he sells them. So I don't know. Okay, Target, Costco, 20 to 30% return year to date. अरे, we're just looking at long term compounders. पिछले कुछ महीनों में क्या हुआ उससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. It could have just as easily been -8, -10% year to date. So okay, AbbVie, what is that? I've never heard of it, although the name is familiar.
It's pharmaceutical.
Pharmaceutical, bro. Stay away from farmers unless they have a winning product that's going to take market share from everyone else. So I mean, every case is different, but in general, farmers are very risky bets.
The reason why this company is good is because it's a dividend aristocrat
Okay,
and the stock price keeps increasing.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, close to 5% in dividends, I see. Okay, share this tab instead. Yeah, 5% in dividends. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Nice. But yeah, I mean, uh, let's say you invested 5 years ago, you would have made just 69% your money with like 5%. What, 5% every quarter, or is this 5%? What? How often do you
Yearly.
yearly? Yeah. So I mean, bro, I mean, dividend stocks are really for old people. So I mean, when you're young, you should not, you know, buy dividend
YOLO. You
stocks.
should YOLO your money.
Yeah, you definitely shouldn't do that. Otherwise, you're not gonna have money for your old age at all. So okay, okay. Target and Costco. Costco is a great company. Costco is a great company. Costco is a fucking amazing company. Costco is that company which basically Nick Sleep and Charlie Munger hold. So, like that already speaks volumes about what kind of company that is. In fact, they still have a huge runway to grow because they still have a huge runway to go because they recently just opened up in China, their first store, and they actually had to shut the store down because of how many people had entered the store on the first day. So Costco, if you guys don't know, is basically like fucking Walmart on steroids. They basically provide everything for dirt cheap prices, but the catch is that you got to buy in bulk. Like you got they're not going to sell you one water bottle. You got to get a pack of 6 water bottles, and that's you buy the pack. That's cheaper. And basically how they stock their shops is basically like warehouses, and you have the entire unit there. And they're basically very smart. They know that the more choices there are, the more confused people get. So what they basically do is they keep only the top three brands of any category in their business, in their shops. So like if you want regular tomato ketchup, they're only gonna keep Heinz and two more brands. That's it. That's it. And they also sell really cheap food in their stores. So those are their loss leaders. By the way, they don't make money on their say, for example, hot dogs and pizzas, but that's just to bring people in. And Costco basically does not make money on products. Costco makes money by basically selling a Costco membership card. All right, they literally make no money on their products. That's why they market up very little, and they make money through the membership cards. And yeah, their whole philosophy is passing on the benefit to the end customer. And yeah, that's really amazing.
And
And yeah.
one of the biggest advantages of Costco is that they do not allow entry unless you have a membership card.
Oh yes, yes, I mean that's how people are going to buy
Yeah,
the membership card, right?
yep,
Yeah.
it's exclusive.
Yeah, and some people, some companies in India are trying like a cheap ripoff of their business model, and it's really not working out for them. Like companies like Easy Day, right? Like uh, basically, if you're gonna let people walk in without the membership card, you're basically what, like,
There
yeah,
is Metro over here. It's not yet grown that much, but I think it's got only like two or three branches in India.
okay,
So they cater to like business owners, and unless you have a business and like only have business and they require some documents regarding your business, only then you get a membership card, and only then are you allowed to come in and buy.
okay.
And same thing, it's like everything is in bulk.
Hmm.
So like your local shopkeepers and kirana stores, they can buy from there.
Mm-hmm. Actually, a friend of mine, he lives in Lucknow, right? So his dad also runs a shop. So his dad pretty much basically runs a kirana shop, and his dad purchases everything from the Lucknow Best Buy. So I'm like, his dad's business is screwed, man. I mean, it's basically gonna go out of business. But yeah, I think for that company that you're mentioning, Metro, don't you think they're coming in their own way by demanding too much documentation for a membership? Like anyone should be able to buy in bulk, right? Like
I
Costco.
I don't know.
They're setting up too many barriers for customer entry. Basically, if I want to buy something in bulk, I'd like to go in and buy in bulk without having to prove that I own a business, right?
True, true. I haven't looked into it that much. I just know that they require it. They used to require it. I don't know now if they've changed it or not.
Hmm.
But yeah, and it's exactly like that, like warehouse style. Even restaurants, like
Hmm.
smaller restaurants, they can pick up their food from there.
Hmm. 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 Yeah,
So they don't cater to the, what do you say, uh,
the
retail market as such.
right. And
Like
the main problem in India is that people don't buy in bulk because people have a liquidity problem. People don't have that much money lying around. Like, people in India are pretty much hand to mouth, right? As money comes in, you buy more toothpaste. As money comes in, you buy the next month's, uh, the next weeks, in fact the next 2 weeks ration. So, like, but when I actually lived in Gujarat, right, when I was young, I used to live in Gujarat. People over there are really smart. Like, they buy many months of dal at in bulk together. They put, like, put them in drums. They put like neem leaves in between them. And yeah, Gujaratis, like I'm talking about the general population in states. Like, Gujaratis really understand the benefit of buying in bulk and buying in advance. But in general in India, people are people have that cash crunch, and people aren't really sold on the benefit of buying in bulk.
I
So
would disagree in the terms of cash crunch, because if I would compare US compared to India, I would say that India has got more, like, families have got more cash reserves than American families.
right, but these this is not money that they're spending in. These are their savings that they have in the form of gold or jewelry in their house or in cash, right? So
True.
what I'm saying is that in India, I don't see people purchasing in bulk. In fact, I've seen shopkeepers cutting up things that are supposed to be sold in packs and then selling them individually. So that's basically the basically Dollar Tree business model. So, like, basically, again, in America, in the cheaper neighborhoods, people don't go to Costco, people go to Dollar Tree. So they basically sell small quantities close to like $1, but then it's actually more expensive. You think you're paying just $1, but the per unit cost is much higher than you would buy it somewhere else. So I think yeah, just I think the day that the Indian population really is like convinced on the benefits of buying in bulk, that day something like a Costco can work. But not until then. uh, Again, in India, the shops that really do well are basically the shops that are selling items loose or items singly or separated, not in bulk. DMart has great returns, just noticed. Yes, DMart. Yeah, but I don't know if DMart is going to be that big, because the main thing I see in the you can say the groceries or the everyday consumer staples purchase market is that I, at this point, get everything from Big Basket. It's much cheaper and it comes to my doorstep, and I don't have to move a finger. So, like, Big Basket is like really, really, really cheap. Like, in fact, Big Basket still arrives in a few days. If you order from Big Basket's warehouse through your Dunzo app, it comes to you immediately, and it's very cheap. So that's like a game changer. I was just showing my dad, like, I just bought some groceries and pasta yesterday, day before yesterday. So I was just showing him the bill, and I was like, look, I got this packet of pasta at just like half the price, and everything else I got is like 10 rupees, 20 rupees off. And if you've ordered more than 239, the delivery is also free. So I think first, India's kirana stores were at risk because of big chains, but I think even the big chains are now at risk because of internet companies at this point. So yeah, I mean, and I think Big Basket was bought by Tata Group, right? Let me look that up. Big Basket. Tata. Yeah, Big Basket. Tata Digital buys 64% stake in Big Baskets. So yeah, Tata has bought Big Basket, and Reliance has bought Reliance Jio has bought Milk Basket. And in fact, Reliance is like even more hands-on. They've actually fired their management and put their management in place. So like They're big on having control. So yeah. So I think, yeah. So I think even um, uh, Reliance, which runs the Reliance Fresh Marts, have basically realized the threat, the incoming threat. So I think Reliance is basically going to use the Milk Basket network to basically make that the Geo Mart, and basically send products to people's houses for cheaper. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. So I'm not currently looking at DMart, because unless they're able to shift to an online model, it's not going to work out for them. Plus, I have a friend who is from Mumbai and he's studying in the University of Buffalo right now. So I asked him what's the comparison between DMart and Walmart or Costco, for example. And he says there is no comparison, because DMart is just like a regular market. It's just a little bigger in size, or sometimes it can be as small as one floor of a small building. But the thing is, DMart is not pricing its products as competitively as a chain like, say, Walmart or Costco does. So I don't know about DMart, especially given the online uh, food delivery of I mean.
Just to pitch in, DMart has started online delivery.
Oh yeah, yeah, sure. That's good. That's good. But
Yeah,
that's great. But I think they're also gonna have to make people go to dmart.com or download their app and buy stuff, right?
yeah, and they even have, I guess, pickup locations. Like, you could,
Hmm.
so if you want it really fast, you can just go and pick it up at your
Right,
closest pickup location.
right. That's a good idea. Have you used Dmart?
Not for the online delivery because quality isn't that great, and usually I go to that place that I told you, Metro, because of the
Mhm.
bulk pricing.
Nice, nice. So okay. So do you have where do you live, Sanjeev?
Mumbai.
Okay, you live in Mumbai. Okay, okay, okay. I thought you were Bengali or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay, you are Bengali, right?
yeah.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. So you live in Mumbai. So okay, so you must know a lot about DMart. Tell us about how DMart stores are, and if they are any better than any other stores.
I don't usually go to DMart because quality isn't that great.
Yeah,
Like,
my friend said the same thing.
DMart is like a normal grocery store, like on steroids, you could say.
Hmm.
So, like, you could have like lower middle class people going to DMart mostly, but other people generally go to Hypercity,
Hmm.
places like Hypercity, or else what
Okay,
else?
so Hypercity is like a Whole Foods kind of place, like a Le
Yeah,
Marché kind of.
yeah, 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 yeah. Like a Whole Foods.
Right. Have you heard of Le Marché?
Which place?
Okay, I think the Le Marche is mostly in North India only, so it's in like Delhi, Gurgaon, Noida, all of these places. So
Okay,
it's
no.
like the Whole Foods of India, basically, especially in North India. So it's like it has all of these imported charcuterie and cheese and lots of imported products and.
Yeah, another Whole Foods sort of clone could be Godrej Nature's Basket.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I've heard about it. I've heard about it. I think they even opened a location in Delhi, and I've been to it. It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
And if you want to go even above that, there was another place I forgot. Food Hall.
Oh, that's owned by the Future Group, right?
I don't know who owns it, but that's like extremely bougie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's owned by the Big Bazaar people. Food hall.
Yeah.
Nice, 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 nice. So Kunal is asking you, how does DMart compare to Spencer's or Big Bazaar?
I would say Spencer's, I don't know. Means there was like one Spencer's like close to where I live, but that closed out, so I don't know what is the current state. But Big Bazaar would come above DMart in terms of
Okay,
quality of store.
okay, all right, all right, okay, okay. I didn't know that. So, okay. So, talking about just general retail and not high-end retail. Talking about in terms of competitive pricing, do you think DMart is any more competitive than any other chain, or is it like roughly the same price?
I don't know. I haven't visited like DMart that frequently, and I haven't kept an eye on prices.
Okay. All right.
Hmm.
So again, like combining all of these insights, and also my friend from Mumbai who is studying at Buffalo, he told me that DMart is like, nothing like Costco. It's not a Costco. I thought, sitting in my room in Gurgaon, I thought DMart is a Costco, but it's not. Okay. Okay. Utkarsh says, I was going through DMart and VMart. What view you guys have on Byju's? Okay, I think Byju's, earlier it was this company that was just getting like crazy investments and had no revenue, but now I think they people pay for it. I don't know if they have an annual report. I'll have to go through it. Anyway, private company, we can't buy or sell. Okay, so for me, Big Basket seems expensive. What are you talking about, bro? Big Basket में हर चीज like half price पे 10 रुपए कम, 8 रुपए कम, like 20 रुपए कम होता है. What are you talking about? Big Basket, I think maybe you're confusing it with Nature's Basket. Nature's Basket is the high end expensive one. Big Basket is very 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 cheap. At least over here it is. I don't know. Where are you from, Kunal? You're also from Maharashtra, right? I don't know if Kunal's with us. Yeah, Sanjeev.
Yeah, Nagpur is in Maharashtra. I think it might be possible because Big Basket just is doing promotional offers, because even when Big Basket started out in Mumbai, it was really cheap, and then slowly they started to up their prices.
Mhm. So the great thing with the Big Basket is, since they're procuring everything in bulk, and they're going for like full on domination. I think they'll definitely want to pass on that benefit to the customers. And it's been quite a while since they've been here, and in Gurgaon, compared to everything else, Big Basket is really cheap. And I think maybe that's because they've established the logistics and the network really well, because one Big Basket warehouse is really close to where I live. So like literally, you order above 200 rupees, there is no delivery charge, and already everything is a lot cheaper. And we have been, for the last 2 years, been buying from Big Basket exclusively. So I think over here it's very cheap, and we'll see where it goes from there. Okay. Decathlon, if it comes, how will it be? Decathlon is a French company, right? Let me look it up. Decathlon. I have no idea. I've never really
It's a sports company, sports retail outlet.
Yeah. I've been to their store like twice, and actually, I saw one of their sales meetings once, and this was back in the year 2017, I guess. And they were talking about how what all products they're actually selling for a loss just to bring in customers, and that was a little bit insightful. Just overhearing that, like talking about loss leaders back then, was really insightful. But do people really go to Decathlon to buy stuff? I mean, it's got to be cheaper than the Nike store or the Adidas store, but are people really checking for Decathlon? Do you guys go to Decathlon? Show of hands, or unmuting the mic and talking about it. I don't know. I don't go there. Does anyone know about anyone? Okay, cool. So I think, but they do have a pretty big store in a metro station close to where I live. So yeah, they've definitely got money to spend. I don't know how successful they are in India. We'll have to look that up. Okay, they have like 3 locations in Gurgaon. Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, okay, I think we can end this discussion now. Philip Morris, great company. Costco, great company. And what else did we discuss? We discussed some great traders, and yeah, yeah, nice discussion, guys. So should we end it here? Okay. Kunal has something to say. Hold on. Nagpur. I ordered 4 cup of noodles, for example, 50 each at the local store, 70 on Big Basket. Okay. check JD Sports UK, sports merchandise marketplace. I know JD Sports UK, but I do know JD.com, which is like one of the biggest Chinese internet companies, and it's a pretty deep moated company selling at a deep discount right now because of the sell off in China right now. You can get JD.com for very cheap right now. JD, Tencent, Alibaba, buy all of them if you can. Okay. Okay. No DMart or Big Basket in Ambala. They'll get there. They'll get there. JD Sports UK. Let me see. JD Sports. This isn't a public company, right? Is it? It is. JD Sports is a public company. Wow. With great returns also. What the fuck? Wow. In just the last 5 years, really good returns. Really good returns. Okay. McDonald's. The main problem with McDonald's is it has nowhere to grow. It has grown to its full potential. It's pretty much in every single country. And
They make money through renting out their properties. They're not in the food industry exactly.
I know, Sanjeev, they have no new restaurants to open. Do you understand? Like
True.
when basically, okay, when you're buying a stock, you're looking for the market cap to rise. And when you're looking for the market cap to rise, you're looking for the earnings to rise. So earnings are not gonna rise. It's gonna grow at a very mediocre rate, like 5-6% a year, 2%, 3% even a year. So you want companies whose earnings are growing really fast, so you can get good returns. McDonald's has grown to China as well. McDonald's is everywhere. McDonald's is everywhere. It's right behind Subway in terms of number of restaurants. Like Subway has 24,000 restaurants in the world, and I think right below that we have McDonald's, which has like something like 19,000 restaurants in the world. So it has nowhere else to grow. And okay. On the other hand, Sanjeev, Chipotle Mexican Grill, it has a long runway ahead of it. It's only in like 6 countries.
Chipotle is expensive though. It's not fast food per se.
What I'm saying is, right now it's only in like 6 countries, right? It has the
Yeah.
whole world to expand to. So
Yep.
also Bill Ackman owns this stock, and it's selling for relatively cheap. A great growth company with a long runway ahead of it, selling only for a 94 PE. Basically, when Bill Ackman bought it, it was at a 200 PE. So the last, I think, 1 year the stock has declined. So that's 50% amazing. So, but then, yeah, its stock is like here. In the next 10 years, it's going to be here where my mouse is. So yeah, Chipotle is a great company to buy and hold for the like the next 10-20 years. Like it has a few thousand restaurants. Compare that, not even a few thousand restaurants actually. Like, yeah, only 2,700. Compare that with Taco Bell, which has what? Taco Bell has how many locations in the world? Let's see. Basically tens of thousands of locations. Taco Bell has 7,072. So basically, Chipotle can still has like Chipotle still has like is only 1/3 of the way there, and yeah, it can get there. Okay, yeah, Chipotle can get there. Shake Shack can get there. In-N-Out can get there. In-N-Out is a private company, but Shake Shack is a public company. Hold on.
In and out, I believe they want to have less locations.
Yeah, it's also private company, so they're no one's putting a gun to their heads and asking them to expand quickly. So
Yeah,
growing at their own pace.
because I read somewhere where like in and out they don't want to grow. They don't want to have more number of locations.
Mm. Yeah, it's also like family run business, right? So it's really what they want will happen. So yeah, and also like again private company, so it doesn't really matter how at what speed they grow unless we can invest. So yeah, Shake Shack went public in 2015. Again, it has how many locations? Let's see. Only 250 locations. Compare that to a McDonald's, and of course McDonald's always going to be cheap. McDonald's locations. So McDonald's is basically in a 39,000 locations. So Shake Shack has only 250 locations. So Shake Shack is another company that you can buy and hold for decades because they're expanding.
I was thinking of McDonald's in terms of a moat company.
Oh yeah, look, bro. The thing is, you can have the best, highest earning company in the world, but if it has nowhere to grow, right, the stock price is not going to grow.
Okay.
Okay, uh, there is in the long term there is 100% correlation between where the company's how much the company's earnings grow and how much the company's stock grows. If you have a company that over a 40-year period is growing at 6% a year, your stock price is going to grow at 6% a year. Okay. So that's something that Charlie Munger says really often. So you have to really, really look at the company. And if a company has already reached, again, like John Malone says, it's asymptote, right? It does not matter how moti or how valuable the company is. Of course, McDonald's is like this great company that no one can fuck with. Nobody's taking its spot. Nobody's ever going to be McDonald's or replace McDonald's. But McDonald's has nowhere else to grow. So that's the thing. Yeah. So okay. I thought H&M would be good, but not great returns. The thing with retail is that, especially fashion retail, is you can get wiped out in just one collection, one summer collection, and people don't like it, you're wiped out. So yeah, but then Zara is a good company. uh, Uniqlo is a good company. H&M is also a good company. I'll have to look at its financials to see what's actually going on. Let's see. H&M. Hmm. Yeah, I have no idea what's going on over here. I don't know much about fashion retail, but yeah, when I learn, I'll probably be able to tell you guys. Okay, thank you so much for joining, guys. Should we end the discussion here? Yeah. Okay. Thanks for joining, guys. Bye bye. Thanks, Sanjeev, Mahesh, Kunal, Aditya, Umang, Shiva Kumar. We're just wrapping up. Wrapping up. Thank you. Okay. Bye bye. Thank you.